So let's talk about Moon-Neptune aspects. So what happens in humans when they're born during a Moon-Neptune aspect? So Moon-Neptune aspects really have to do with a lot of sensitivity because the moon is our baseline moods, our emotions, how we nurture ourselves and other people. It's where we are emotionally on a baseline level most of the time. And so with Moon Neptune aspects, there's this kind of emotional connection with the divine and romanticism and maybe escapism through music or art, right? So Neptune is a planet that has to do with pulling from somewhere other than what is earthy, if that makes sense. So people with strong Neptune or Moon Neptune aspects, they are pulling intuitively or psychically from something that is almost like higher. It's beautiful. It's, music, art. And so, depending on the type of aspect that is present in the chart, a Moon Neptune aspect can bring a kind of refined connection, like an emotional, refined connection to music, art. It can be brought into their relationships, especially their romantic relationships, um, and it can also be a way with some aspects, like for example, the square or the opposition, or even the conjunction. It can serve almost as a pathway towards sort of escapism in a way where it's actually trying to get out of reality, um, trying to have an emotional high or an emotional um, even an emotional checking out from what is actually going on. So it becomes like this escapism where you might sort of listen to music or go to the cinema or watch movies, or go to the theater or go to concerts to have like uh, well, it can be in a good way in the sense that it can be a way for you to get out of reality and to kind of nurture your own emotions through, which is the moon. So nurture your own emotions through the activity of engaging in music or theater or art or movies, anything that is like beyond what is here, what is on the earthy plane in a way. So it's fantasy, it's imagination, it's indulging in that. But in some cases, like for example with the square, it can become like this, almost like this addiction, like this emotional addiction to these states, to these mood states, to these states of consciousness that are not fully present in the here and now. So, for example, with squares, a square between Moon and Neptune, you can have like a person who is emotionally addicted to certain kinds of to certain kinds of mood states, for example, or states of consciousness that they may use alcohol or drugs to kind of get into that state, right? So I think it's just about finding that balance between this emotional, deep, refined, like otherworldly connection to certain emotional states or music or art or movies, um, and not have it go overboard to the point where you're basically mm, indulging in a kind of negative escapism where you're just kind of trying to get out of what is to be done in the practical reality, because we need to look after both. We need to look after our emotions. We need to look after our like we need to nurture our imagination. We need to nurture our emotions, but we also need to look after what is important to be done on a practical level. So I think with something like the square, for example, between Moon and Neptune, it can become this ever never ending search for states of highs or states of consciousness that are not fully present or are not earthy. So like trying to run away from reality almost. Um, but yeah, like on the positive hand, it can be this kind of refined, beautiful, indulgent in a good way, escapism, where it's just like this divine emotional connection to music or art or cinema or your loved ones or a relationship. It's like this, you're emotionally in tune with that which is other, that which is not earthy. It's not earthly, right? So you're emotionally in tune, which is the moon, with things that are not earthly, which is Neptune, right? Let's see. So also with this kind of aspect can come a way that you might idealize certain emotions and perhaps reject others. So, for example, a person with a Moon Neptune aspect might be very wary of anything ugly, anything to do with ugliness. It doesn't want to deal with things that are ugly or difficult. It prefers refinement, right? Moon Neptune is so psychically in tune with beauty and harmony that it may at times want to run away or escape from things that are more, grimy, ugly. They're not refined, right? So maybe with this aspect can come with this indicate can come this sort of invitation to not run away from the ugly sides of life, and especially with to do with practical reality. So things that you need to look after that are not necessarily going to bring you to those, fantastical states of consciousness. We need to be practical as well to a certain degree, right? And there might be something else going on in the chart, for example, with Saturn, that is more practical, that gives you that more of that practical streak, right? But yeah, like with this kind of aspect, it can be a case where the person is sort of idealizing certain emotions or certain relationships or certain emotional states, that they might try to get that through any means necessary. So they may try to get it through relationships. They may try to get it through, substances or alcohol, right? Um, because this is kind of idealization of certain refined emotional states that we get addicted to. But again, on the positive side, these people are maybe more inclined and more able than other people to kind of really use music as a way to really enhance the emotional atmosphere, right? So moon is our kind of our baseline emotional state, our emotional atmosphere, right? And Neptune is this kind of um, otherworldly atmospheric sort of planet in a way. There's more to it, but that's what kind of one expression of it. So I think these people are more than able to really sort of engage in the creation of an atmosphere, of an emotional atmosphere, right? So putting on music in order to really get into those states that are more beautiful. They're refined. It's like an escape in a good way as well, right? So it's not always a bad thing. So it can be a good thing about this kind of putting on music in order to feel like a connection to some sort of divine thing. Like it's like you're getting in touch with the music in such a high level, right? And when it comes to cinema, people with Moon and Neptune aspects, they can get really emotionally connected to movies and the characters because it's kind of like an escapism again. And it's like you become emotionally attached to the characters and their story, because it's almost like it takes you away from your own life and your own story. So um, Moon is very personal. Neptune is not necessarily as personal, right? It's not necessarily a personal planet. Um, so it's like this connection to things that are not personal, but you're making them connect to you in some way. You're relating to the character, so you're making the impersonal personal in a way, if that makes sense. And that can happen through movies very much. Like you're getting sucked into the movie, you're getting sucked into the characters' stories, and their emotional worlds. And also, Moon Neptune aspects show a high level of empathy and compassion. So again, that can be expressed through movies, through watching movies or TV, because you're getting involved. You're getting involved with the characters, and you almost forget that they're just characters, right? It's almost like you feel what they're going through, right? You feel empathetic towards them. You feel compassion towards them, right? And this can happen with people in your real life as well. So Moon Neptune aspects can be indicators of you having the ability to really empathize and be compassionate towards people in your life or people in the world in general. It can be this kind of universal emotional attunement to what is going on, right? So in terms of the positive refinement and the positive sides of escapism, it can be more like things with the trine, like the trine and the sextile, right? So it can also happen with a conjunction. When it comes to things like the square or the opposition, they create more of a challenge, like a karmic challenge that you have to work through, where you might be trying to escape reality and maybe also not really showing up emotionally or being vague in daily interactions, because Moon can have a lot to do with our daily interactions, and Neptune is very vague at times. It's one expression of Neptune, is this kind of vagueness. So I think people with Moon Neptune aspects can come across in daily life as a little bit vague. They're not um, necessarily fully in tune with the practicality of like what is being said or what needs to be done, right? The emotional life can be confusing as well with these people. For example, with the opposition, the daily interactions with people in your life can be confusing or vague. There can be emotional deception by others or by yourself. So by yourself or by others towards you. Um, but I think when it comes down to it, this aspect really, these kinds of aspects, Moon and Neptune aspects, they show an emotional interest and an emotional involvement in going higher. And there's an intuition about how to get there. And you just have to watch that you don't get addicted to certain states that are going to hinder other areas of your life. So maybe look at that Saturn. Look at what Saturn is doing in your chart. Can Saturn help you in some way to be more grounded and practical, rather than kind of letting yourself get sucked into, deception or an addiction to going higher in some way, an addiction to going to those refined, mystical, otherworldly states through music or alcohol or drugs or, anything like that. It can be expressed, in a lot of different ways. But when it comes down to it, Moon Neptune aspects are intuitive about, it shows it's kind of intuition about emotions and moods, right? You're psychically in tune with what the emotions need in the moment. So you can be very empathetic and compassionate towards others, like I said. You can also be empathetic to, people that you don't even know personally, right? And there's also there's a way of being intuitive about what your own self needs. So Moon even has to do with our eating habits, right? It's anything that we do to kind of nurture ourselves, right? It's our own private nurturance, right? So I think Moon Neptune aspects can also indicate that you have kind of an intuition about how to look after yourself emotionally, or um, how to eat in a certain way to look after yourself well, especially with something like the trine and the sextile. It's like it's a gift to you, and that's a gift. It's a gift of you, um, in that sense. If you have like a trine or a sextile between Moon and Neptune, you can be very intuitive about like what's about nutrition and like how to eat well and things like that. With something like the square, it can become more of a confusing thing for you. So it can go both ways. So with some people, let's say with the square, it can be an inability to really intuit what your body or your emotions need. Or you might be just so sort of involved in the creation of some kind of emotional atmosphere that you neglect other areas of your life. Maybe you forget to eat. maybe you forget to exercise because you're listening to music all day or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So, or watching movies all day because you're trying to get that high. You're trying to get out of that, um, like on some level, you're trying to get out of that mundane environment into something else, and you're like emotionally connected to that because the moon is involved, which is our emotions, right? It can be a very romantic aspect. It can be a very romantic connection in the sense that the two planets are both um, they're both sort of emotional. They're both sort of to do with beauty in a way. Like moon is sort of our the moon is kind of our emotional um, baseline, and Neptune is bringing some kind of beauty or refinement, and so it's just depending on how they're connected, it can bring a lot of different expressions. But overall, just psychically in tune with the emotions and what the emotional world needs, and also emotionally in tune with something that is otherworldly, something that is refined, or something that is kind of, it's like there's a curtain over it. It's vague. It's not something that's realistic, practical. You're in tune with, you're emotionally in tune with, movies, movie storylines, the characters, music, art. So it's just about finding ways to really um, interact with these parts of yourself in a way that you don't go overboard in escapism, for example, right? So because it can go a lot of different ways, but these are just some of the ways that Moon and Neptune can interact with each other in various aspects. And I hope that it made it a little bit clearer about how these planets can interact with each other, kind of the positive and the negative expressions of it, right? So if you enjoyed this and you want more, please do subscribe and leave a thumbs up. And thank you so much for listening.